Morning, everybody. As an ER doc, I am particularly grateful to Cynthia for the metaphor, the beating heart of research, which I'm going to shamelessly steal and use from here on. Let me set this up. I'm going to talk to you briefly about retailers as point sources of of guns used in crime, about the secondary market, also known as a diffuse source, a term that Anthony Braga gets credit for, and close with a few words about privately made firearms, more commonly known as ghost guns. It's long been understood that a small minority of retailers sell a large number, probably more than half, of all the guns that are recovered in crime. But sales are similarly unequally distributed, and it's worth asking the question, are there retailers who sell guns that are used in crime not just frequently, but disproportionately, more often than you would expect from their sales volume? We took a look at this in California. We started with guns that had been traced following recovery after use in a violent or firearm-related crime. So starting with traced guns. Using data that California makes available for research, we then linked those guns not to the retailer who sold them first, which is what a standard ATF trace does, but the retailer whose sale of the gun was most proximate to its use in a crime. We followed the guns forward. So on the x-axis, what you see here for individual retailers is the number of handguns that is the number of handguns that they sold during the period 1996 to 2000. On the y-axis, what you see is the number of those same guns that were traced following use in a violent or firearm-related crime between 1996 and 2003. So there's no intervening sale. Now, on the one hand, no surprise, traces go up as sales go up. But the question is, what's happening on the y-axis? Why are there retailers who sell, let's say, about 4,000 guns and have maybe 5 of them traced, and there are other retailers with similar sorts of sales that have 60, 70, 80, 90 of those guns traced? That's the question we sought to answer in this study. We had lots of information on these retailers, on their clientele, on the firearms, and here are characteristics of the retailers that emerged in a fairly complex analysis. One, no surprise, retailers who sold lots of guns that were used in crime disproportionately seemed to sell fewer guns to police agencies, or for that matter, to individual law enforcement officers. They had a younger clientele, again, not a surprise. They were part of licensees where the number of licensees per 100,000 people was lower. That's a surrogate for cities. Let me skip one, no surprise. If the city in which the retailer is located traces all the guns, the retailer has more traces. That's a given. But the finding that we weren't expecting was that these retailers also had more denials of purchase, because we also had those records for retailers. And we pondered that a little bit. A few colleagues said, but this is paradoxical. If bad guys are showing up to retailers and they're being detected and denied, why are those retailers also having a higher number of traces? And we came up with the concept that we gave a cutesy name to, that perhaps there are retailers who function in effect as bad guy magnets, that they are known to that clientele as people who might be a source of guns. Some people go and attempt transactions with those retailers and they are detected and prohibited, others are not, and those sales go forward and those guns get used in crime. A little bit later, we in essence asked retailers what they thought about this. We did a survey of licensed retailers in the 43 states for which the FBI was able to give us information. These are retailers who actually were selling guns, more than 50 per year, so 1 a week. First off, just for interest, these retailers, 2/3 of them, of our respondents, told us that they had personally experienced an attempted straw purchase. I won't define that here. Somebody needs to know, ask me in questions. 40% experienced an attempted off-the-books purchase, a purchase without paperwork. Not surprisingly, those experiences increased with the respondents. The responding retailers reported sales volume, pawnbroker status, with denial frequency and trace frequency as reported by the respondents validating our findings in the earlier study. We asked them, do you think there are retailers who are involved in illegal transactions? And if so, how often? Their average response was about 3%. And we gave them a number of reasons. Why do you think a retailer might do that? And I won't repeat the response that was the modal response. Let me move on, though, and we're going to move one step downstream and talk about the secondary market. All those transactions that others have referred to here that occur after first purchase, before a gun's recovery. Instances in which the purchaser from these are ATF data here. They were published just last month. An ATF private researcher collaboration led on the researcher side by Anthony. Firearms for which the purchaser and possessor are the same person are relatively uncommon. It's much more common for there to be intervening transactions, and sometimes we just don't know. It's also worth noting about this secondary market, again, National Firearm Commerce and Trafficking Assessment data, now from published just last month. It's a relatively efficient market. This graph is displaying a quantity known as time to crime, from first retail sale to recovery after use in crime. Nobody's saying that there weren't transactions in between. See the previous slide. Nobody is saying that this is the first time the gun's been used in a crime. This is the time after which the gun is recovered and submitted for tracing. And note that a fair percentage of these times to crime are within a year, and over half, at least during the pandemic, are within 3 years, which suggests a market that moves with fair efficiency. And to talk about a little bit more about how that market operates, we're again looking at ATF data from a slightly earlier volume in the series. These are findings from ATF's assessment of more than 12,000 trafficking investigations initiated in recent years. 40% of them involved an unlicensed seller. 40% of them involved a straw purchasing ring. Both of these were increasing over that time period that I mentioned there. You can see that far smaller and decreasing percentages involved theft, and still smaller but unchanged percentages involved corrupt FFLs, sales at gun shows, which provide a unique opportunity that I'll show you in just a second, or online brokerages. Let me show you some images of the secondary market at work. These are photographs taken at a gun show in Phoenix, Arizona. Not necessarily the same show. It's held at regular intervals in Phoenix at the Arizona State Fairgrounds. On the left, actually across this array of images, are private party transactions in one stage or another. Individuals will simply walk the show with a weapon, information describing it, or they'll rent a table and display guns indicating that these are private sale guns, which means no waiting period, no background check. A pawnbroker, for example, might have guns that they're selling as a licensee, but also guns that are being sold through private party mechanisms. This gun show used to have an open-air market where you could see at any given time maybe a dozen transactions like the one in the right-hand image proceeding simultaneously. That area has now been shut down. Here is what a straw purchase looks like, just so you can see one. The real purchaser is on the left. The straw purchaser is on the right. The straw purchaser is in the process of pocketing money that has just been handed to him by the real purchaser. The real purchaser indicates the gun he wants the straw purchaser to buy. I'll show you that gun in just a moment. The straw purchaser has initiated the transaction with the FFL and is filling out the lengthy 40 Form 73 paperwork, while the real purchaser looks on closely and occasionally offers assistance. A sales clerk writes up the standard sales receipt for the firearm. It's that funky looking AK that you see with some additional magazines in the image behind her, while a representative of the retailer makes the call and gets clearance based on the straw purchaser's paperwork to ATF. The straw purchaser hands over the money. and the real purchaser takes possession of the firearm. I should note explicitly what's implicit. These transactions are conducted right out in the open so that a researcher with a hidden camera can stand there and take photographs of them. No one has any suspicion, no one has any sense that they're at any risk of apprehension. And finally, a few words about ghost guns. They're produced by an array of mechanisms. They're not new. I have photographs from gun shows going back 15 years or so ago. They're made, excuse me, by an array of technologies. Here's the situation in California, where ghost guns became a particularly acute problem as the pandemic years came upon us. Ghost gun recoveries soared in California, but then began to decrease. And again, from ATF's data, ghost gun recoveries increased rapidly and then leveled off. I should tell you that's a California-only story. In states other than California, rates of recovery are still rising. The intervention responsible was regulation placed on these guns in California. Similar regulations went into effect under federal law in last August. They're under challenge. The open question is whether they will survive, and I will stop there. Thank you very much.